Welcome to Dyspraxic Rosie Writes, a channel where we talk about dyspraxia, chronic illness, and the writing life. Today's video is part of a 5-part series. Currently we are on part 3, but do not worry if you missed a part. I will link in the description to the previous videos. There are 5 parts in total to this traditional publishing series. To see all of them, of course, I will do the thing you're used to hearing of telling you to like, subscribe, hit the bell, share with friends, etc. So the 5 parts are as follows. Part 1 was on querying. Last week's was on dealing with rejection. This week's is on working with publishers. The week after that will be on author platform. And the 5th and final one will be on author money. So, first of all, I will answer the question that is the most common one about working with publishers. Do you need an agent to work with them in the first place? Well, this entire thing is one big, giant, it depends question. So rather than assuming one way or another, I recommend you do your research first before you directly pitch publishers, because some will require agents to see your manuscript in the first place, and some will not. In the video on querying, I described the concept of unsolicited, but you also want to look out for that keyword of unagented as well if you're going to pitch publishers directly. And in many cases, those publishers, the ones that are more likely to publish you if you don't have an agent is things like indie publishers, trade publishers, and a select number of imprints. So basically publishers that operate like indie publishers, but have the resources and support and ecosystem of what's called the Big 5. So the Big 5 publishers are the ones that have the biggest international reach. They're the ones that come up the most often. When you go to a bookstore anywhere and you try to buy a major book, they're the ones that will come up time and time again. For example, things like Simon and Schuster, Hachette, Penguin Random House are just a few examples. So imprints are ones that operate within Big 5 ecosystems, but they very much have their own niche focus and mandates and workforce. But even then, many of the ones I mentioned have exceptions to that rule. It's, once again, I'll repeat this again, it's a matter of doing your research as you go through this process and seeing if they explicitly say that you don't need an agent to pitch them directly. On a little side note, I will mention that I have got by twice now without having an agent. That is because I write in a very niche area, the neurodiversity area. For the most part, I have experienced that many of the publishers who have seen value in that so far have been ones that were just willing to take the manuscript as is and consider it as is without having to talk to an agent. Another core benefit of having an agent is more having a friend in your corner that has industry connections and can handle many of the business negotiation and administrative parts of things. That's what many of my disabled writer peers who do have literary agents, what they have articulated as the value of having an agent in their corner, and that's amazing. I also know too, from being an actor's daughter, that he said that for having an agent, I know this is a different type of agent, but it's still like a similar set of benefits. Having an agent in his corner for, I think it's something like over 40 years now, has been hugely beneficial for him focusing on what attracts him to his career. So the more craft side of things rather than the business side of things, it has allowed him to just focus on that, and for her to handle all the more business side of things, and for him to feel very secure in the fact that he can just focus on what he's best at. And that can be a benefit too, but frankly, you do not have to rely exclusively on an agent. You can very easily be someone like me if you're in a really niche area and get straight to the source, get straight to the situation of publishers, just rely on them right away. You have to keep in mind with agents that they are not a guarantee of getting published. Sometimes people will get an agent and it will still take just as much time and to truly get published. And so I just want to make it clear, you don't have to have an agent, but it can have its benefits. In a moment, I will describe some of the elements to expect out of working with a publisher, particularly the thing that a lot of people don't realize, which is that it takes a really, really long time. So just in a moment, let's switch on over to Zoom, and I will explain to you exactly what an average timeline for working with a publisher is, and why, and what sort of things they normally edit and review throughout the process. Once you've signed that contract, you get that feeling for a second of, I did it. I'm going to be traditionally published. Woohoo, I've got a book deal. And after that, once the excitement has worn off, you will have something very, very important to follow. And that is the agreed delivery date of your contract. Often that is very strictly stated, but if for whatever reason you don't think that's realistic, it's worth saying very, very early on. If you have a very specific reason why, you might need just a little bit longer, but I wouldn't recommend trying to push that to a different date. I would recommend just following whatever that delivery date is that they provide, because often they're trying to follow a time frame for trying to squeeze in a publishing schedule of their own. So also the other thing that is probably the most important thing you have to remember in the contract is that you will be provided with a maximum length for how long your manuscript can be. It's fine to go a little bit over, like if you're like, I don't know, I guess 10 words over or something like that, then it's fine. If you're like thousands of words over, that's when they're going to really, really start to have problems. As Bloomsbury so beautifully puts it, they can accommodate minor changes in length, like if you're 10% more than the agreed length. But anything more significant than that will have an impact on price, of list price above all else, and the sales potential of the book, and that's when you'll run into problems. So do take that word maximum very seriously. But if you're under it, then great. That's actually a good thing. You also will have to consider permissions. Permissions as you write the book is an important consideration because it's the legal stuff. It's involves things like your photographs that you use, any diagrams, anything that is a quote from a book or an audio broadcast, YouTube video, etc. You have to follow some, although the most important thing you have to follow is what's called fair use. I will link to the Society of Authors website where they go into detail and about exactly what you need to follow. As this process progresses, you will receive a production letter. That is often the case at traditional publishing houses too, saying that your manuscript has been received and outlining the route your book will take. And they will check in with you as you progress through this process. And that is true too with a lot of the other steps of the editing process. But you have to be really, really, really patient. I always describe traditional publishing very much as a hurry up and wait kind of process. It's very much like you wait for weeks and weeks and weeks after you're done one part of the process. And then suddenly you'll just get an email and it will say, you have this many weeks to finish this. And you really just have to internalize that as normal. There's really nothing you can do about that. So the steps of the process are as followed. You start off by working with the commissioning editor. The commissioning editor looks at the full big picture of the manuscript itself. And their job is to see how, like, the full structure of it in terms of like who you're writing for and clarity and style are like. And then after you've done all the waiting, the hurrying will then progress to copy editing, who will then look over it in terms of, do the links to your sources work? Is your grammar fine? And elements like that. And after that, you will go into typesetting, which means that it's the design / layout. And then once again, you'll be checked over once again by a proofreader who will make sure that nothing was missed by either the copy editor or the commissioning editor in the first place. And then you'll go through things like indexing, figuring out what pages reference what subject matter. And then, voila, you'll start to be very, very late on in the process. And that's when you can start having that conversation of when you're launching and things like that. So this entire process, in a lot of modern publishing houses, there is a project manager behind the scenes whose job is to take all the creative input of the creative individuals behind the scenes involved in the process of a book and add the practical framework of how long it's going to take, where you fit it into the publishing process, how much money, and all that. So to give you a rough guesstimate, copy editing takes an average of around 4 weeks. Typesetting takes 2 weeks. Proofreading and indexing takes another 2 weeks. Then there's another proof revision, which takes another week. Revisions after that, which takes another week. Final corrections, which takes 1 week. Final file creation, which takes 1 week. And then printing is anywhere between 2 and 12 weeks. And then after that, the bound copy delivery from warehouses is a 12-week process. So as you can see, it isn't quick. I always find that when I talk to family, about books I'm working on, there's always this like, oh, when's the book coming out? And I totally get that. I get the excitement, but that's the nature of the industry. Everything takes a really, really long time. Hope you enjoyed this video. And if you enjoyed this video, like, subscribe, and share with a friend. And I will see you again soon for part 4 of this traditional publishing series. And I'm coming to you straight from a very warm day in Marrakesh, Morocco.